The Knowledgeable Provider podcast is intended primarily to entertain, also to inform, but it is not a substitute for actual medical training and should not be used by anyone to diagnose or treat any medical condition in themselves or others. If you need medical advice, please make an appointment to see your own knowledgeable medical provider. The opinions expressed by me and anyone else who happens to appear on the podcast are solely those of the people expressing them and are not necessarily representative of any other entities. Other than the lunches at the office, I do not receive any sort of compensation from pharmaceutical or medical device companies, and I have no other relevant financial disclosures. Look, this is all for fun, okay? Don't sue me. All right, on with the show. Hello, welcome back to Knowledgeable Provider. I'm your host, Jody Marks. Got a lovely conversation to share with you today with my friend Cindy Hutchens. Cindy's been living with lupus for some time, and she agreed to come on the podcast and share some of her experiences. We ended up covering a lot of ground about lupus, but also about the healthcare system and her experiences interacting with different aspects of that. I imagine those parts of the conversation might stir up some feelings for healthcare folks who are listening and other people that have chronic illnesses. I spoke with Cindy in her lovely home a couple of days ago. Her husband Dale was there as well. He's been a supporter and friend of the podcast for quite a while now. Appreciate that. You won't hear his voice on the recording. I couldn't convince him to get in front of the microphone, but he definitely helped us out during the interview some, and you'll hear Cindy mention his name a couple of times. So without further ado, please enjoy our conversation. All right, Cindy Hutchens, welcome to Knowledgeable Provider. I really appreciate your time. I've been looking forward to speaking with you today.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it too.
You want to start off and just introduce yourself? Who are you other than somebody that has lupus?
My name is Cindy Hutchens. I'm 67 years old. I raised two boys, and I went to Arizona State University for mechanical engineering. I worked at NASA for 20 years at Marshall Space Flight Center. I was a mechanical engineer there. My hardware turns urine into clean water for the astronauts to drink.
No way. That's so cool.
Way. So that's what I've done for the past, for my adult life.
Hey, forget about lupus. I want to talk about that. How does that work?
It's a phase change process. So you take the dirtiest water and you have to change phases so that it goes from liquid to gas and then back to liquid.
Well, that's super fascinating. You got to work on something like that.
Yeah, it was. It was a great career. I enjoyed it. I worked with some really great people.
Did you meet any of the astronauts?
Yes, I trained 3 of the astronauts, and they were killed when the Columbia blew up. So I lost my flight experiment and 3 friends.
I remember when that happened, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm so sorry. We'll do a whole separate podcast about that sometime. Well, I'll go ahead and put you on the calendar.
All right.
So we're here to talk about your experience with lupus. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I've probably had lupus most of my life and didn't realize it. And when I turned 40 is when I had a big flare. I was a costume mistress for a high school play that my son was in. So I was working all day getting my flight experiment ready. And then at night I would sew and make kilts. And it was for Brigadoon. So there were a lot of kilts and jackets and that sort of thing. I would wake up in the morning and my shoulder and my elbow would be hurting. So I had joint pain, but I thought once I got finished with the play that I would stop sewing, and so it would all go away. And I went to my dermatologist for just my regular checkup, and she asked me if my joints were bothering me. And I thought that was a strange question from a dermatologist. But she had seen a rash on my face, and she asked if she could do a biopsy, and so she did a biopsy, and then I had an ANA test. So she sent all of that away and came back positive for lupus. That's been 27 years since I found out I had lupus. Also, I was misdiagnosed a couple of times with Fifth's disease. It's a childhood disease.
Sure.
And appendicitis.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. I had a doctor that didn't know what he was doing. He diagnosed me with those things, and I had a perfectly healthy appendix taken out.
Oh, wow.
Once they gave me that ANA test, though, it was obvious I had lupus. And when I went to the doctor, I found a really good rheumatologist in Birmingham. She said that the life expectancy was 5 to 10 years.
Wow.
But I have always done what my doctor told me. You have to follow the doctor's orders. That's kept me alive, I think, because I had kidney involvement. My kidney function was down to about 10%.
Yikes.
And they did a kidney biopsy and found out I had lupus nephritis.
Okay.
So I started taking large doses of prednisone, 30 milligrams a day. And then after several months, I lowered it to 20. And then I took 20 milligrams of prednisone for years.
Okay.
I'm down to about 3 right now, but they came out with a drug, the first drug in 50 years to treat lupus, and it's a shot, Benlysta. I take that once a week, and my prednisone level has gone way down.
That's great.
Yeah. The prednisone gave me osteoporosis. I broke my back in 4 places at one time, and it gave me cataracts, and it's got my skin is thin and everything that you'd expect from prednisone. I've had it, I think.
Sure. Did it affect your blood sugar?
No, it has not affected my blood sugar. I've not ever had any trouble with my blood sugar, and I still don't.
Yeah, the steroids will wreck you for sure.
Yeah, but without them, I could never have done this. I never could have made it this far without them. So I'll take some adversity to be able to live. That's what you have to choose. You have to choose whatever can make you feel better.
And a lot of medicine is just risk versus benefit.
Yeah, that's right. When I broke my back, we were in Alaska, and we had gone to this movie theater. They'd turned it into a theater. It used to be a bar or something. And so there were chairs sitting around, and I had a bulging disc in my back. And so I got up to stretch and to see if I could get that to feel better. And they had a stage on the side, and it was about 6 or 8 inches. And I stepped off of that and grabbed hold of the back of the seats and crunched my back.
Ouch.
Yeah, it was quite an interesting trip.
Did you have to be treated there, or did you come back first?
They put a back brace on me there and gave me some Dilaudid, and I made it back home. And the first thing the doctor said was, it looked like you've been in a terrible car accident, because my bones had just all broken.
When they found out you had the lupus nephritis, was that after you already knew you had lupus?
Yes, they had diagnosed me with lupus from the blood work. And then I went to a nephrologist, and he did a kidney biopsy and confirmed it. And that's why I took the high doses of prednisone for a while to get my kidneys back. But I haven't had any more trouble with my kidneys since that.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it is.
You never had to go on dialysis or anything?
No, but for years he would not let me use but one arm to give IV, to have an IV or to give blood in case I had to go on dialysis.
Right.
But he sort of turned me loose. I'm not seeing him anymore right now.
Okay, that's great.
When I started taking Plaquenil, and I was in the hospital getting that kidney biopsy, I broke out in hives, and they called the dermatologist, and so she came over, and the rheumatologist was there, and my kidney doctor, and she called him out in the hall and said, we've got to do something about her hives. And so I immediately stopped taking Plaquenil, so I've never been able to take that drug, which is the first go-to drug for lupus, because it's easier on you than the prednisone.
Right.
I've also taken methotrexate. I took that for years, and then my liver enzymes started going up. So I had to stop taking the methotrexate.
Yeah, that's a rough one.
Yeah, it is. I think it helped me.
Have you ever had to kind of advocate with a healthcare provider? Like, no, I know you want me to come off of this, but I need to stay on this.
A little bit with the prednisone, coming down off of prednisone, because they want you to get completely off of it. And it's so hard to do. And you come down just a tiny bit at the time, and you have to lower it a little bit and then stay at that level for a long time before you try to lower it anymore. And so I think that's one thing that doctors and people like you should pay attention to, is it's not that easy to come down off of the steroids.
Yeah, I know what you're saying is going to be helpful to so many people that would hear this, because I've had the same conversation so many times with patients about, yes, it would be great if you could get off of this, but you got to do what you got to do.
That's right. You do. You have to live. If you've not got any quality of life, then, okay, I broke my back. So what? I got over it. At least I can still have a life.
I think that speaks to your resilience, your toughness there, that statement. You still ride that Harley out there?
Yeah, not often. No, I think I'd break all my bones if I tried to ride a motorcycle.
Are you still seeing the same crew? You still seeing Dr. Yates?
Yes, I still go to Dr. Yates once a year for my checkup. And it was just my regular checkup where she noticed that I had that rash. So I feel like she saved my life.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad she picked up on it.
Yeah, because the kidneys were already involved.
You mentioned that you'd probably been having symptoms for a long time. What kind of things were you experiencing that, looking back now, you say, oh, that was the lupus?
When I was a teenager, I liked to lay out in the sun, and that made me sick. I couldn't lay out in the sun and get tanned. I'm so fair, I burn anyway. But it never made me feel good to lay out in the sun like other people seem to enjoy it. That's one thing. I had mono when I was in high school, and that's somewhat correlated to lupus. A lot of people who have lupus had mono when they were a teenager. I don't have as much energy as other people. I've never had a lot of energy. I guess ever since I had mono, my energy level just never did get back up to where it had been. I think that's one of my symptoms of lupus is low energy and fatigue. Fatigue is it's not like when you say you're tired. To most people, they know what that means. But if you have lupus, that's a whole different type of being tired. It's like you hit a wall and you just can't go any farther.
And I'm sure the combination of the disease itself and then all the medicines you have to take.
Yeah, I do take quite a few medicine.
I'm sure those don't help with the fatigue.
I have a list of symptoms that came from lupus.org.
Okay.
Extreme fatigue, pain or swelling in the joints, headaches, sensitivity to sunlight. Some people, it affects their skin. That's your biggest organ, I guess.
Sure.
Is your skin, and it affects their skin. And I was losing hair when I found out. Some people get sores in their mouth and nose. That's one thing they always ask me when I go see the rheumatologist, if I've had any sores in my nose or mouth. And then Raynaud's disease, where your fingers turn white because their circulation is bad on the ends of your fingers.
Right.
And toes, and I have that.
The Raynaud's is real common with a lot of autoimmune disease. And
Is it?
Yeah. How long did it probably take to get a correct diagnosis from when you actually presented with symptoms to when you got the right diagnosis?
Probably 4 or 5 years. I think the typical is about 3 years to find out that you have lupus. And I would like to say that if you have symptoms, then you should keep pestering your doctor because they may blow you off. Because these symptoms could be lots of different things. And just one symptom by itself doesn't prove you have lupus. So you have to really pay attention to different symptoms and keep going back to your doctor until you get a good diagnosis.
Yes, I will second that from the healthcare provider perspective for sure, because there's so many things to filter through and deal with, and the squeaky wheels get the grease.
Yeah, that's right.
If you come in once a year and say you're tired,
no big deal.
You should get some more sleep and exercise. That's what you're going to get, So yeah, that's a great point. Keep at it.
Yeah.
And I guess that's part of why it can be challenging to diagnose too, is because a lot of the symptoms are so vague.
Yeah.
Like when you put them all together and somebody has lupus, it totally makes sense. But everybody's tired. It can be challenging. That can make it challenging also.
Yeah, it can.
Have you run into any stigma, either in the medical community or anywhere else, just having a chronic illness like this, either before or after you got the diagnosis?
I really haven't. I don't think people understand. I think that they probably wonder why I don't do more than I do, but nobody's ever made any comments or said anything. I felt like once I got my diagnosis, then I had the attention of the doctors. Before that, my symptoms, were just sort of poo-pooed off, but I got a really good rheumatologist right away, and she was great for me. She retired, and I've had a couple since then at Kirkland Clinic in Birmingham, and they've all been very good. They don't make light of anything. That's something that's really important, is to get a good doctor that you can trust.
What would you say to medical professionals, doctors, PAs, NPs, whoever, about caring for patients with what you have? What would your advice to us, the medical community, be?
To listen, to make sure you listen and really hear what somebody's saying. Don't blow it off, but just take them seriously.
Just about every time I've ever been seen as a patient anywhere, I feel like I can't finish a sentence. I feel this great pressure to spit it out in 3 seconds or they're gone.
Right. Yeah, I don't like for the doctor to have his hand on the door walking out while you're still trying to ask questions.
I know it.
And I've had some doctors like that.
A lot of them are like that. I should say a lot of us are like that. I'll take the blame for everybody.
I'd like to say that 80% of the people who have lupus are women, and 90% of those women are Black women or women of color. I think that's something important to know.
And I'm sure that contributes to some of the misdiagnosis and delayed diagnosis and that sort of thing.
Yes, and the amount of research that's done. Because if it was a lot of white men, they'd probably do a lot more research.
You got it. It's funny, but I know we're laughing, but clearly that's not funny. But no, I think you're completely right. I always tell women, if men had to get testicle exams like women have to get mammograms, there'd be some way more comfortable way to do it.
That's true.
Yep. There's also a thing in medical training where we learn about skin things on white skin. Uh-huh. And so it's a little bit harder to recognize things on brown and black skin. And so that kind of can be a source of misdiagnosis for stuff too.
That's interesting.
Some built-in racial bias there.
Mm-hmm.
When you actually received the diagnosis, when you actually got a name for what you had, or correct name for what you had, how did that change your outlook or your thoughts about things?
Scared me because my aunt, my father's sister, died with lupus about 10 years before that. And she was in her early 60s and had gangrene in her organs, and it was gruesome.
I bet.
So I got a book on death, a poetry book on death. I was reading those poems. It took me a while to get a handle on this may not be a death sentence. Once I got over that, then just learning to live with your new life, because it changes everything. You can't do what you used to be able to do. You don't have the energy to do it. And I had brain fog. I still get brain fog occasionally. I finally had to retire from my work. I just wasn't getting anything done anymore. My brain didn't work the way it used to. It's hard to describe.
What other kind of specific ways has it affected you as far as just quality of life or things that you could do but can't now?
I don't do any shopping. I don't go to the grocery store. Dale does all of the shopping. I order things online a lot. He does all the chores around the house. I don't have to do any chores, which is a blessing. But I know it gets old for him to have to do everything around the house. But I just don't have the energy to do it.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to imagine any aspect of life that wouldn't be touched by this disease somehow.
Yeah, really it is.
Do you have a lot of flares and remissions? Do you have times when it's worse and times when it's better? Is there a lot of up and down?
I don't notice that I have too many flares anymore. It's just one long flare, I guess.
Okay.
It's been over a year since I've felt like doing anything. I've been going to other doctors. I went to a cardiologist, and he's been doing a lot of tests to see if some of my problems are that, but he hasn't found anything. I just feel like this is the way my life is now, and unfortunately, it affects Dale more than it affects me sometimes, I think, because he has to do everything. We don't get to travel as much as we'd like to because my energy just won't hold up. Traveling is hard, even in a car, because just sitting in a car and sitting in the same position for a long time wears me out. We can't go over 5 or 6 hours a day, and it's really hard to fly for many hours.
Have you identified any kind of particular trigger or any activities or foods or anything that you like, if you do this, you are going to suffer for it?
When you feel like doing something, you do it, you feel good, and you use up your energy. And that's something that you have to be aware of, that you can't just keep going even though you feel good. You have to pace yourself because you'll end up in bed for a few days. If I do too much, then I'm in bed for several days trying to get over it.
Does that ever stop you? Like if you're in the middle of doing something that you're enjoying and feeling good, do you consciously go, I can't keep doing this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to stop sometimes.
That's kind of a shame. That makes me feel sad.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that people who haven't been that tired, who haven't had that much fatigue, I don't think they understand what it's like.
How's the emotional or mental health part of living with a chronic illness like that? How's that been for you?
Well, it causes depression. I've had depression for years. I take antidepressants for that. And it gets a little better, but it's never going away, I don't think.
The depression?
Uh-huh.
Was that something that you were already being treated for, or is that something that you kind of came into later?
It was a long time before I found out I had lupus.
Okay.
But it got better, and I went several years without medicine and then started having more problems. Probably about the same time I found out I had lupus.
That's another thing I'm sure that can go undiagnosed and misdiagnosed and cause problems for a long time.
Yeah, that's a learning curve just to find out what kind of drugs you can take that make you feel better.
Absolutely. And it is a lot of trial and error with that, for sure.
It is.
Did you have to go through a lot of that?
I've taken several different kinds of antidepressants. I took Wellbutrin for many years, and that worked pretty good. Right now I'm taking Rexulti and Aplinzin, and I think they're keeping me pretty steady.
You said you had an aunt that had lupus. Any other autoimmune diseases you know of that are in the family?
My mother has had RA, and she also had discoid lupus. And discoid is just on your skin. It's not systemic like my lupus. So she couldn't be out in the sun. It would make her break out and make her sick. That's all I know of that are close to me.
Do you have any others? If you don't mind me asking. I guess I should say, just for the listeners, Ms. Hutchens is not my patient, so I don't know anything about your medical history other than what you're choosing to reveal. So Please don't answer any questions that you don't want to reveal.
Okay. I do have another problem. It's antiphospholipid antibodies.
Yeah.
That's part of lupus. It's a clotting disorder, and I had a blood clot in my lung at one point, so I have to take warfarin the rest of my life. I started bleeding and had to have a hysterectomy because the bleeding wouldn't stop.
Wow.
Yeah, so I guess that has affected me somewhat there.
Do you have children?
I had 2 boys. One died.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So I have a son and his family. He has a wife and 2 children. My grandkids are 16 and 18. One of them's at Auburn for the first year this year. The other one goes to Huntsville High. She plays volleyball.
Very good.
So I'm really proud of them.
Absolutely. Any autoimmune disease in that group?
No, thank goodness.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, usually it affects women in their childbearing years usually. So, I mean, there's still that to look forward to for Caitlin. It can happen any time.
Is there anything you found to be helpful other than prescription medicine? Any kind of alternative, herbal, anything like that that's been helpful to you?
No, I can't find any. I haven't found anything else that could help me. A lot of people want to make suggestions, but they don't know.
Sure. Yeah, you can find a lot of helpful suggestions out there, for sure.
But I've done pretty well with my medicines. I've been lucky to have insurance to pay for them because that's a big thing. The group that has lupus, a lot of them don't have enough money for their medicines.
Sure.
And that's a big thing. I've always been lucky.
This is my personal opinion. That's a terrible thing about our healthcare system. It's almost like we've decided healthcare is a privilege, not a right. I hate that.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to other people, other patients struggling with this?
Find out as much as you can. Read. Try to find other people who are in the same situation. I'd like to say get a support group, but I tried to start a support group here in Huntsville, and I couldn't get anybody to show up. We're very unreliable people. I'd have one or two people come occasionally, and it just got to be too much. I think they've had a support group here since then. I don't know if it's currently active, but people with lupus aren't very reliable to show up when they're supposed to.
I'm sure that's an uphill battle to start something like that from nothing.
Yeah, it is. And I had the help of the ones in Nashville. It just didn't work.
Do you know if the group in Nashville is still active?
Yes, I think they probably are. They have a walk for lupus once a year here in Huntsville that they've been doing. My sister was involved in helping with that for a good while to raise awareness. I think lupus is featured in May, is when they have their big awareness push. If you can't find a support group, then just be aware of it. The Lupus Foundation has a good website. It's lupus.org, and you can get a lot of information there.
I'll put a link to that in the show notes if anybody's interested. I would imagine that if you put together all the people who have some sort of autoimmune disease, that's a huge community.
Yeah, you're right.
Has your rheumatologist ever offered anything like that, or are they involved with any kind of community groups or support organizations or anything?
No, and none of the rheumatologists that I've ever been to have really suggested. I think there was a flyer in one of their offices for a support group, but I have been in several different research programs. One was finding out if you could afford your medicine, and it was geared toward minorities. And then I did some blood work. I was in another research program, and I don't remember what they were trying to find out, but the Kirkland Clinic at UAB is very good. They do a lot of research.
How often do you have to go down there?
Every 4 months or so.
Do they have patient portals and ways to contact them and all that kind of stuff? Yeah.
Yes, they have a patient portal, and you can ask for your medicine to be renewed or just ask general questions. And they get back with you pretty quickly. And then all my blood work, they put it on there so I can see it right away.
We run into so many problems with people not being able to contact different medical offices, or places won't get back to them. Or That's like a third of what we do is try to run around and help people just get information they need.
Yeah.
Or information we need.
Yeah.
It's a huge problem. So I'm glad they are easy to get in touch with and responsive.
Yes, they are. They're very responsive. One thing I would like to say as a resource is the Lupus book by Daniel Wallace. That's a very good book, and if someone is just recently diagnosed, it helped me a lot. It explains things very well.
I'll link that in the show notes as well. Well, that feels like a pretty good place to stop. Is there anything else that comes to mind? Anything else you'd like to share? What didn't I ask you about that I should have asked you?
I just think learn as much as you can about the lupus. That's a big thing. Find a doctor that's understanding and then learn as much as you can.
Well, Miss Cindy Hutchens, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate all your insight, and it was really nice talking to you. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it.
All right, that does it for this episode of Knowledgeable Provider. I'm your host, Jody Marks. Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to like, subscribe, or follow on your preferred listening platform. Give us a nice 5-star rating and leave a nice review. If you'd like to help support the show, you can do that at patreon.com/knowledgeableprovider. And as always, stay safe, take care of yourself, and take care of your patients in that order. Does your endocrinologist have they offered any kind of resources as far as community-based things, or are they involved in anything like that?
No, I've never had an endocrinologist group.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant rheumatologist. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Say it again then.